Hello, my friends. Today we are going to cover chapter 5 of NCERT class 6. The chapter is separation of substances. As we all know, some substances cannot be consumed directly, so we need to separate these from different substances. Now we'll elaborate in this chapter, and the chapter starts. There are many substances. When we notice a substance being separated from a mixture of material, tea leaves are separated from the liquid with a strainer. So, in the daily routine, we see that our mothers strain the tea or milk with a strainer, which is a part of separation of substances. So, next is grain is separated from stalk while harvesting. Milk or curd is churned to separate the butter. As we learned in chapter 3, we gain cotton to separate its seed from the fiber. So, there are different processes and different things are separated from different substances or things. Like I mentioned, is grains are separated from the stalks, and the cotton is separated from the seed or the fiber. Okay, perhaps we might have eaten salt, dalia or poha. If you found that it had chilies in it, you may have carefully taken them out before eating. Now, if there are things like dalia or poha, there are some chilies, so we uh, separate or take out from the bowl, and we do not consume it. So this is also a part of separation of substances. Suppose you are given a basket containing mangoes and guavas and asked to separate them. You would do. What would you do? Pick out one fine kind and place them in separate container, right? Seems easy, but what if the materials we want to separate are smaller in size and than mango or guava? Imagine you are given a glass of sand and salt mixed in it. Impossible even to think of separating salt from the mixture by picking out grains of sand. Now here is a very good example given that, like, if we are given a huge bowl containing mangoes and guavas, if we need to separate them, it is very easy process. But on the other hand, if we are given a glass with salt and sand, it would be very much impossible for us to do or think about it also. Like, on the other hand, separating mangoes and guavas from a huge bowl is to be considered a easy process, because there are large um, sized materials, and on the other hand, the salt and the sand are considered as a small sized material which is impossible to be separated. Now here is a very interesting table given, that is, why do we separate substances? On the first column there are separation processes, second, purpose for which we do the separation, and third column is what do we do with the separated components. Now the first point is separate stones from rice. Now when your mother cooks food, she firstly separates the stones from the rice. And on the other hand, there are also few market keepers who also separate these stones from the rice. So the purpose for which we separate is to separate two different but useful components. Now here, the rice and the stones are considered as useful components, and we throw away the solid components. So the solid components are thrown away. So these are the separated components. Now the second point is churning milk to obtain butter. To remove non-useful component. Now non-useful components are to be separated from the milk, and we throw away the impurities. Okay. Now the third point is separate tea leaves. To remove impurities or harmful components, we use both the components. Now here we are saying that we use tea leaves and as well as tea as useful components. Now till now done we have read about different separations, but what are the methods of separation? We will discuss some simple methods to separate substances that are mixed together. You may come across some of these methods being used in day-to-day activities. Now, the first here is mentioned, that is hand picking. Bring a packet of grain purchased from a shop to classroom. Now spread the grains on a sheet of paper. Do you find only one kind of grain on the sheet of paper? Are there pieces of stone, husk, brown, broken grains, and particles of any other grains in it? Now remove with your hand the pieces of stone, husk, and other grains. The method of hand picking can be used for separating slightly larger size impurities like pieces of dirt, stone husk from the wheat, rice, and pulses. The quantity of such impurities is usually not very large. In such situations, we find that hand picking is a convenient method to separate substances. Now, here is a diagram or a picture given where the hand picking separation is being depicted. Now, the second method of separation here mentioned is threshing. You must have seen bundles of wheat or paddy stalk after harvesting the crop. Stalks are dried in the sun before the grains is separated. Each stalk has many seeds attached to it. Imagine the number of grains in the field of that would be more than hundreds of it. How does the farmer separate the grains seeds from the bundles of stalk? It is a very interesting question, that uh, how the harvester or the person or the farmer separates grain seeds from those of huge bundles of the rice or the wheat. So one may pluck mangoes or guavas from the trees, but grain seeds are much smaller than mangoes or guavas, so plucking them from their stalks would be possible. How does one separate grains seeds from their stalks? So it is a very interesting question. So the process that is used to separate grains from the stalk, threshing. In this process, the stalk is beaten to free the grain seed. Sometimes threshing is done with the help of blocks. Machines are also used to thresh large quantity of grains. In the other words, threshing is a process where the bundle is beaten with the hands or with the machine, where the separated seeds and the crop or the harvest is done. Now, the second is winnowing. Now we'll study or read an activity, that is make a mixture of dry sand with saw dust and powdered dry leaves. Keep this mixture on a plate or a newspaper. Look at this mixture carefully. Can the two different components be made out easily? Are the sizes of particles of the two components similar? Would it be possible to separate the components by hand picking? Now take your mixture to an open ground and stand on a raised platform. Put the mixture in a plate or sheet of paper. Hold the paper or the sheet of the paper containing the mixture at your shoulder height. Tilt it slightly so that the mixture slides down slowly. What happens to both the components, sand as well as dust or powder leaved, falls at the same place? No, the sawdust and the sand doesn't fall on the same place. Okay, because here the wind manages to separate the two components. This method of separating components of a mixture is called winnowing. This process is called winnowing. Okay. Winnowing is used to separate heavier and lighter components. So here we'll mark that the winnowing is used to separate heavier as and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. So here is a diagram given where it depicts that a lady is standing at a height and she has kept a plate or a tray on a height tilted to some angle, and all the seeds are directly down, and the husk and the saw and the sand is separated on an angle different to the seeds. Now we'll read further. This method is commonly used by farmers to separate lighter husk particles from heavier seed of grains. The husk particles are carried away by wind. The seed of grain yet gets separated and forms a heap near the platform for winnowing. The separated husk is used for many purposes such as fodder for cattle. So here as we see the winnowing process, the left out husk is used to be eaten by the animals. So we can say that both the things, the seed separated as well as the husk, is used for a useful work. Now the next is sewing. Sometimes we may wish to prepare a dish with flour. We need to remove impurities and ban that may be present in it. What do? We use a sieve and pour the flour into it. Sieve allows the fine flour particles to pass through the holes of the sieve, while the bigger impurities remains on the sieve. In the flour mill, impurities like husk and stones are removed from the wheat. Before grinding it, usually a bag full of wheat is poured on a slanting sieve. The sieving removes pieces of stone, stalk, and husk that may still remain with wheat after threshing and winnowing. So, as we have read earlier, that threshing and winnowing, so it is a manual process, है ना? So, these manual process, obviously, there could be some mistakes in it also. So, we use these sieves to remove the impurities that are left behind after the process of threshing and winnowing. So, this process is sieving. Now we'll next study that is sedimentation, decantation and filtration. Sometimes it may not be possible to separate components of mixture by winnowing and handpicking. For example, there may be lighter impurities like dust or soil particles in rice or pulses. How are such impurities separated from rice or pulses before cooking? Rice or pulses are usually washed before cooking. When you add water to these impurities like dust and soil, particles get separated. These impurities go into water which becomes a lighter muddy, little muddy. Now, what will sink to the bottom of the vessel, rice or dust? So obviously, the rice would settle or sink on the in the bottom of the vessel. Now we here is a question that why the rice settles down? Have you seen the vessel is tilted to pour out the dirty particles? When the heavy components in a mixture settles after water is added to it, the process is called sedimentation. So this separation is known as sedimentation. When the water along with the dust is removed, the process is called decantation. So when the water is added, here is a confusing line, but you need to remember that when the water is added, that is sedimentation, and when the water is removed, this process is decantation. Okay, let us find a few other mixtures that can be separated through sedimentation and decantation. The same process is used for separating a mixture of two liquids that do not mix with each other, for example, oil and water. From their mixture can be separated by this process. If a mixture of such liquid is allowed to stand for some time, they form two separate layers. The component that forms the top layer can then be separated by decantation, okay, or by removing the water. This is it. And now we'll read the activity 5, that is collect some muddy water from the pond or a river. If it is not available, mix some soil to water in a glass. Let it stand for half an hour. Absorb the water carefully and note your observation. Does some soil settle at the bottom of the water? Yes, some soil settle on the bottom of the water because the sand is a heavy material. That's why it settles down or at the bottom. Now slightly tilt the glass without disturbing the water. Let the water from the top flow into the other glass. What will you call this process? Is this water second glass still muddy or brown in color? Now filter it. Did the tea strainer work? No, the tea strainer wouldn't work here because the particles are very small. Let us try filtering the water through a piece of cloth. In a piece of cloth, small holes are or pores remain in between the woven threads. These pores in the cloth can be used as filter. So this cloth could be used as a filter process. Okay. Um, if the water is still muddy, impurities can be separated by a filter that has even smaller pores. A filter paper is one such a filter that is has fine pores. Now here is if we need more separation or remove fully the dust particles, so we need to use the filter paper to do it. A filter paper folded in form of cone is fixed into a funnel. The mixture is to be poured on the filtered paper. Soil particles in the mixture do not pass through it and remains on the filter paper. So now the sand particles or the impurities remain on the filter paper and doesn't enter the glass. So we can say it is filtered and or the impurities are removed. Fruit and vegetable juices are usually filtered before drinking to separate the seeds and soil particles or of pulp. The method of filtration is also used in the process of preparing cottage cheese paneer in our homes. You might have seen that making paneer a few drops of lemon juice are added to milk as it boils. This gives a mixture of particles of solid paneer and a liquid. The paneer is then separated by filtering the mixture through a fine cloth. Now we'll see what is evaporation. Heat a beaker containing some water. Allow the water to boil. If you continue heating, would the water turn into steam? Yes, the water would turn into steam. If you continue boiling the water, and a time or a time may come when it will be completely disappeared. Now add 2 spoons of salt to water in another beaker and stir it well. Do you see any change in the color of water? Can you see any salt in the beaker after stirring? Heat the beaker containing the salt water. Let the water boil away. What is left in the beaker? In this process of evaporation to separate a mixture of water and salt. This is evaporation. This activity denotes evaporation. The process of conversion of water into its vapor is called evaporation. The process of evaporation takes place continuously whenever water is present. Where do you think salt comes from? Seawater contains some salt mixed in it. One of the salt is called common salt. Okay. The sea water is allowed to stand in shallow pits. Water gets heated by sunlight and slowly turns into water vapors. Through evaporation, in a few days, the water evaporates completely, leaving behind the solid salt. Common salt is then obtained from the mixture of salt by further purification. uh, Now we'll further read use of more than one method of separation. We have studied some methods of separation of substances from their mixture. Often one method is not sufficient to separate the different substances present in the mixture. In such a substance, we need to use more than one of these substances. Okay, we'll further read in activity 7 that denotes take a mixture of salt and sand. How will we separate these? We already saw that hand picking would not be practical method to separate these. Keep this mixture in a beaker and add some water to it. Leave the beaker aside for some time. Do you see the sand settle down at the bottom? The sand can be separated by decantation or filtration. What does the decanted liquid contains? Do you think this water contains a salt which was there in the mixture at the beginning? Yes, it is. Now we need to separate salt and water from the decanted liquid. Transfer this liquid to the kettle and close its lid. Heat the kettle for some time. Do you notice steam coming out from the spout of the kettle? Take a metal plate with some ice on it. Hold the plate just above the spout of the kettle as shown in this figure, like this. Okay, what do you observe? Let us all the water is kept in the let all the water in the kettle boil off. When the steam comes in contact with the metal plate cooled with ice, it condenses and forms liquid water. The water drops that you observed falling from the plate were due to condensation of steam. The process of conversion of water vapor into liquid form is called condensation. Now we'll again read. The process of conversion of water vapors into liquid form is called condensation. Like uh, the here the beaker is there. Okay, we have kept hot water in it as well as salt as well as sand, and we have kept it on a boiling phase, and we have taken a plate, kept some ice on a tilted angle. Now when the beaker is when the this kettle is closed, the steam comes out. The steam or the evaporated water comes out, and the plate gets hot. Like this, the condensation is there because the ice melts down, and again the water is formed. Now we need to cover this activity 10. Take two glasses and pour half a cup of water in each of them. Add a teaspoon of salt to one glass and stir till the salt gets dissolved. Go on adding salt 1 teaspoon at a time till the solution saturated. Record the number of spoons of salt are dissolved in the water in table 5.2. Now we need to write these things, these recorded materials here, or substances dissolved in water, number of spoons. Okay, what do you notice from this table? Do you find the water dissolve different substances in different amount? Yes, the salt, the sugar are dissolved in different amounts. We have discussed in few methods of separating substances. Some of the methods of separating uh, separation present in this chapter are also used in science laboratories. We also learn the solution is separated or prepared by dissolving a substance in a liquid. A solution is said to be saturated if it cannot dissolve more of the substances in it. Okay, if you set dissolving substance in it. Okay, if a substance is or a solution is said to be saturated. Now saturated is a term used when we cannot dissolve more substances. Okay, so now we'll read what are these methods. First is hand picking, threshing, winnowing, sieving, sedimentation, decantation, filtration, evaporation, condensation, saturation and unsaturation. Okay, so thank you so much.